I'm so pleased. The number of questions and comments have been terrific, and I'd like to kind of keep that conversation going. And all three of our speakers like the interaction and want to hear from you and so forth. So our second speaker is particularly near and dear to us in the Slavic department, as well as a friend of TLC. Actually, all three speakers are kind of TLC language friendlies. I'm so pleased to have all three here. But Marina Pataplak comes to us from two sides of our TLC friendlies, one from the Department of Slavic and Eurasian Studies, where she has been a lecturer in our department now for the last 2 years, but has been a stalwart assistant instructor during her graduate days at UT. Thank you. No, thank you. But her PhD is not from Slavic, but instead from our incredible nationally world-recognized program in comparative literature, where I have to add, having had the honor of serving on her dissertation committee as one of her supervisors, an incredible look at both Russian and Spanish. Literary editorships. Really interesting topic. I know at least 12 people have read the dissertation now. As always, that's a big number for dissertation. That's a lot. So we're very pleased. Marina is simply, as I said, one of our most involved instructors. She's taken over, I began the intensive program several years ago in 2010, and she's taken over the coordination of this now very much involved program, 4 sections of intensive Russian that were taught in the fall, ongoingly keeping our students immersed in this 6 hours per semester program of intensive instruction. And in addition to that, now she's been involved for the past year in the creation, as part of a larger granting project, of several languages at the University of Texas to create an online supplement, online module to go along with these materials in our intensive program. So when this topic was brought up of creating hybrid language programs, I thought of her immediately, both as a colleague and as a friend. So please welcome Marina Pataplak, who will be speaking Russian.
Thank you so much for having me, and welcome back after lunch. It's my great pleasure to be presenting this talk and rather conversation on the topic of hybrid instruction. And thank you so much, Nancy, for giving so many wonderful ideas and practical tools of how we can implement that. So I'll be pushing off of your talk a little bit and inviting a conversation on that topic, because unlike French, Français interactif, Russian is still a work in progress. And I will be talking about the intensive Russian as we teach it right now, as it presents particular features of it being a transitional course already, and some of the future developments that we envision that would be beneficial to students. And again, there are so many questions, so many, hopefully answers to those questions, so I'll invite your participation very much. So to begin with, when I was looking into the topic of hybrid courses, I was just interested and puzzled how they are different or similar to the traditional face-to-face courses, how they're different or similar to the MOOCs, right, so massive open online courses. And it seems that in a lot of research, hybrid courses offer a very convenient model that combines, well, in the best case scenario, combines the best of both worlds. And of course, we'll talk about the relevance of materials. So just to reiterate some of the points that already Nancy has mentioned. So of course, what is a hybrid course? It's a combination of face-to-face and online instruction, and we can further talk about the different ways in which this is conceived of by different schools and different professors. So whether it's just relegating some cultural videos to the online work outside of the classroom, or reducing the number of hours that students need to be present in class and just do a lot of work at home. So we can talk about that and how that would work for language courses. Increased flexibility, obviously, both for students and instructors in terms of when, how you can take those, do those assignments that are online. Digital natives, as you mentioned before, right, or millennials that cannot live without their devices. So,
What?
What? And even what's interesting is this. Well, what I term, but not being a psychologist, obviously, as an acquired ADD, because I definitely have it. I need to check my device all the time, and this has been a terrible habit, but we could hopefully, funnel that into a beneficial route, so make it work for ourselves. So I think whether we're natives or immigrants, I think we're all in that milieu or in that ambience of having so many digital resources and being basically constantly checking different news sources, blogs, as Marina mentioned there, right? Open culture, so there's so many interesting things to read all the time on your Facebook feed and everywhere else. Authentic resources, obviously, is so much easier to acquire now, especially for Russian instruction than it was 20, 30 years ago. Task-oriented or project-based model of education, also what Nancy has mentioned, that now the general course is towards those more practical skills, practical acquisition of practical tools for very everyday practical tasks, right? Buying something. So we're moving away from the model when language course was a segue into literature, foreign literature course, now into just language course to acquire the skills to go and work and live in that new target language. So again, we can discuss whether it's for better or worse. But as a literature person, right, I would say that language course just needs to lead to more literature. But back to the topic. Real life interactions and self-reliance. This is one of the biggest problems that we have for Russian students, the fear. And we'll talk about that in more details. Just the fear of the language, of culture that's perceived as being so enigmatic and wrapped in riddle and whatnot. So that's still there. We need to break that barrier and make our students more comfortable when they do everyday tasks and non-everyday tasks, for example, applying for jobs in Russia. Students' confidence, obviously, and bridging the achievement gap between students from different backgrounds. So some research shows that having a hybrid course really levels out the field for students from different backgrounds, so more privileged, more educated, or coming from a background that gives them more opportunities, education opportunities, and those students who are newer, for example, going to college as the first generation of college attendees. How? That's a great question, how? And by designing those tasks around something very tangible and very easy to account for, so it's a very, they basically take their time outside of the class when they're not put on the spot. So removing that pressure of performing in front of their peers, and then they can do it at home in a more comfortable environment and take their time to watch the video 5 times, for example, instead of just 1 time and responding in the spot. So again, there are many components to that. So psychological comfortability with this task, it being more leisurely, and this research was based actually not on language course, but on psychology course, I believe, so that might be different. So when we'll look at one of the courses that was taught, or is being taught actually at UT, and Gosling, Pennybacker, Introductory Psychology, SMOC. So a synchronized, massive online course. So it combines, because it's taught to 1,000 students, and it's, of course, we never have those enrollments in languages, so the professors were thinking how to make this course feel more personal, so everybody gets some personal interaction, yet everybody will be on the same page, so accountability will be the same for all. And they said that the results, higher student exam scores, better attendance, significantly fewer disparities in grades and forms among students of different ethnicities and social classes. The benefits also appear to spill over in the form of improved performance in the students of other classes during a semester as down the road. So according to their research, that's the glowing results from making it semi-online kind of hybrid course, where they, for example, during the class lecture, they are synchronizing, putting people together in groups of 5 or 6 students, so they work on assignment together, so everybody brings their laptop. And here, the actual picture that I showed before was from that class. It appeared on the website that described the whole project and how it's working. So it's been several years since they've been doing this. They started this program, and it's working really well. And we can, again, discuss whether it's beneficial or not. Bring laptops, so everybody is in their laptop, and I looked at the screens, and everybody showed the same screen for the course. So, so far so good. Nobody had a Facebook page. Yes. So that's another problem that we obviously have in large lectures, and small. Dr. Garza is nodding. that's,
Shaking.
yeah, shaking. So that's another model that's being tested at UT. So we could look at that example as one of the interesting ways of managing the classroom when it's, doesn't need to be 1,000 students, obviously. If students are more comfortable working in smaller groups, we have usually 12, 11 students in our classes, Russian classes, so we can group them and make them do various exercises like that. Why hybridize language instruction? Why would we do that? So, of course, hybridization of language course works with the 5 C's culture, communication, cultures, connection, comparison, communities. So they're working to bring together the components from these 5 important C's of foreign language education according to STFL. It's also prioritization of communicative tasks in class. So if we, as we do it in Russian, and I'll talk more about that, leave the grammar and drills for home study, we can actually start or jump right into practicing those skills in class. So communicative exercises, interesting and relevant cultural information could be shared in class as well. Better accountability for grammar drills, reading assignments, reading communication. And we'll look at another paper that was a write-up for research done on Russian language instruction hybrid course that really tracked how students were performing. And so by using trackable tasks and, for example, setting a specific limit when the material can be accessed and closing that limit or closing the access after that time, really push students to do everything on time and prepare beforehand. I'll mention what program they're using for that. Quizzes obviously are a very useful tool that could be increasing students' retention of knowledge even before they come to class. Increasing contact hours at home and independent work. So if one of the best, if not the best predictor of success of student in foreign language class is the amount of time they actually spend with the language, almost no matter what way or form, I mean beyond the standard grammar, etc. So hybrid classes would really allow us to intensify and increase the number of hours. And I think Dr. Garza's research and what he was doing, it really helps to show how students get sucked into that cultural information and just stay there. So that's one of the interesting points that I think I enjoy actually most about teaching intensive Russian. And of course, solving concrete everyday problems in target language. And I can tell you about the examples of what we do for cultural portfolio in Russian, especially for second year, when we actually students are in charge of getting hired in Russian by filling out questionnaires, or getting married in Russian, so all of those. So a couple more studies that I would like to reference. These are also dating back to 2005, 2006. And as Nancy pointed out, so the interest in hybrid courses has been around for such a long time, for a decade, if not more, right? More than a decade. But it's interesting that we don't have more hybrid courses right now, well, not at least in Russian, given such interest and so much research done in that area. So when it was done for Spanish in 2006, initially it was designed as a response to lack of resources. There were not enough instructors, and there were so many students that just couldn't teach. And providing a hybrid course allowed the same number of instructors to give many more sections, open up many more sections of Spanish. But they did it with less face time, so it will be 3 class meetings and 2 hours of independent online instruction at home. So it also, yes, it just sounds like homework, as you mentioned, right? So they should be doing it anyway. So we can also argue about different models and different structures of those courses. The authors also mentioned that there was a disagreement and debates in their department about the grammar approach and communicative approach. So there were it helped to mitigate those differences and bring people together through a hybrid course, so you could do your grammar and you could do your communicative approach in class. And they said that from what they saw, there was better student preparation and better accountability. Again, through the fact that they're doing their grammar at home and then come prepared and ready to participate, so there's no time wasted, just an explanation to just zone out and think about their own things. trying to explain aspects, for example, in Russian, right? And what was done for the Russian language that was really interesting in 2005, they used computer-mediated communications. Yes, thank you very much. Computer-mediated communications, CMC, affords both instructors and students the time and opportunity they may lack in live classroom to work through the negotiation of meaning with a focus on form. So, but it's not technically as hybrid as I would like it to be, because they mostly used emails in Russian and message board, discussion boards. So basically it's still written communication. They didn't really test or improve their listening skills. So how hybrid it is, we can talk about that, but to me it's not the hybrid that would benefit mostly our students of Russian. And of course, a very important topic, the skillful scaffolding of all the authentic resources that Nancy mentioned as well. So that's the most labor-intensive part of this, of providing intensive or authentic materials, and skillful scaffolding is absolutely necessary if you want to provide anything. Again, it comes with its own problems because the relevant materials change so much, and of course, right now everybody knows who Carla Bruni is, right? And then in 10 years.
Right.
So that's the problem that we encounter all the time in Russian as well, because I'm excited about this video and I post it and we work on it, we understand it, we read the lyrics, and Mark has done a lot of work in that area as well. But then 2 years later, it's not that relevant anymore. So we can again discuss that point and see what happens in different languages. So unique Russian challenges, and this is the Russian hybrid. It's a great hybrid, right? Russians are inventive. So just off the top of your head, what would be challenges with the Russian language with making it a hybrid course? With online instruction as being a part of obligatory, an obligatory component of the course, so you have to earn a grade to pass the course. What would be the first most glaring challenge?
The alphabet.
Yes, the Cyrillic alphabet. Still very difficult for students to, not to master, but to type it. Right, so Cyrillic alphabet, you can get the stickers, you can learn, there are all kinds of different layouts that you could use, but still it's not intuitive, it's not easy, and a lot of students are struggling just because they're so used to typing so quickly in English, and then it's, so they just feel impeded and just slowed down by the whole process of trying to convey your thoughts in the language in Cyrillic. So, yes. So the accent marks, for example, it's really hard to put in when you're typing for an assignment. Of course, according to the Defense Language Institute, Russian is a Category 3 language, which means it's almost the most difficult category, and it takes, for example, 48 weeks for intermediate proficiency to be acquired, whereas, for example, for Category 1, it's just 26 weeks. So all of these challenges combined together are, I think that's why we see less progress in terms of hybrid courses and their availability for Russian. And of course,
And that's 48 weeks of full-time
Right.
instruction. It's
Right,
not just one course. It's
absolutely,
That's
yes.
all you're doing is Russian for 48
Right, that's
weeks.
the, yes. Yeah, so the instruction of the Defense Language Institute
Right,
model, right,
right.
so total immersion. And which, of course, we cannot approximate here. We could with intensive if we tell them to drop everything else, immerse themselves. And of course, the target country with this future task, if students have goals of doing business in Russia, for example, the cultural component is absolutely important, because we need to tell them how difficult it is to do business in Russia. what are some of the things they must know before they go? So it's not as straightforward as it could be with some other languages in some European countries that have a more streamlined, for example, business practices that are more similar to American. But of course, there will be always differences, but just not such a, yes, the opposite almost. So these are the particular practical issues that I see impeding the development of full hybrid courses in Russian. what we've been doing in intensive Russian so far is that we're doing the cultural portfolio, which is the hybrid part of the course. These cultural portfolios consist of 20, up to 20 activities per semester for first-year Russian, for example. And students can choose from 20 different activities listed online on Blackboard, because we're using Blackboard for them, but we'll be using Canvas for the future. So that's where, for example, students can go and choose furniture for their apartments. Very simple tasks, adequate for their vocabulary, for their grammar knowledge. And they don't need to compose long text, but they're interacting with Russian online furniture stores. They're making purchases, they're learning, even if they don't know that they're learning, but they're learning the ways of saying, for example, shopping cart or checkout. So all of these important things that they will need later when they go to Russia and try to find their way in the real world online. And then in the second semester of intensive Russian 2, we give them more complex tasks, and I'll just show you a couple of examples of tasks. So for the intensive Russian, cultural portfolio is a large part of the hybridity of it, and also the fact that we ask students to study grammar at home. So they come prepared to class to participate. This is not as streamlined because still some students rely on us, the professors, to tell them or teach them the grammar that they were supposed to learn at home. And of course, Russian grammar is difficult. And of course, we want to help them as much as possible, but we physically don't have that much time to spend in class to go over each and every point. But we do help them sometimes. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So the idea is that students come prepared to class to jump right into communicative exercises, conversations, group work, partner-to-partner dialogue creation, for example. So this is one of the examples of the first year portfolio assignment, so navigating the city during the first semester. The map of metro or subways is given to them in Russian, so they cannot speak what they can find. So, and you have to find your way using the characters from the book, Live from Russia. Do those 4 tasks, right? So we know where the main characters or the American American photographer's apartment is within Hut, and then he needs to navigate his way to the tiniest place. A young Russian student who's helping him in Moscow. So they do these exercises and they get more acquainted with with Moscow and the structure of Moscow subway. So this is one of the tasks that they're asked to perform. Again, all at home, and then they print out, it's either a screenshot if they're buying something, for example, because they make purchases, food purchases, for example, at the grocery store, or they just give answers to these questions and print out, put them in the binder, and we check them 4 times during the semester, 3 or 4 times.
I think this is a terrific example you put up here for us. When we think about general learners from a larger population across the country, and our students here at UT, the task here is so layered. It's not simply about the Russian and getting around. It's about what is a metro.
Right.
The vast majority of our students have never been on a metro before, and then see something like that. It's not just a metro. I mean, let's assume they have been on, say, one in LA or in New York. Moscow is 6 times the size of the one in New York, for example. And so it's this kind of sense that the actual object is foreign to them as well.
Right.
Every single bit of that is part of the task. Right?
Absolutely.
It's terrific idea.
And that's the beautiful part of cultural portfolios as designed for this course, is that each and every activity is a segue into more and more interesting explorations that students do themselves because they get so mesmerized and interested. So in a way, I was interested to hear that Nancy said that, of course, everything that we expose them to should be prepared and scaffolded, not just random videos of babies, right, speaking the language. But we're trying to solve that problem by not making those videos an obligatory thing, but to create a Facebook community that's closed and unlisted, and that's where we put the fun resources like the videos and the signs and photographs, and there's so many of them, I think. Others who teach that course with me right now, Marina, will say that we always have those funny things going there, and students discuss or at least see them, and they don't have to react, but it's just part of their awareness. But it's also difficult because not everybody uses Facebook, so that's another question that I would like to pose to the audience, because whether we should use that, well, those who do use Facebook, they use it all the time. So it's very much, even exposing them to Russian culture in this way still leads to increased contact hours and, right, so.
What is the percentage, I'm curious, since I'm not teaching the course this year,
Right.
of students who don't do Facebook among our students now?
Some of them just don't want to
how small the
be,
number seems to be.
right, some of them don't want to expose themselves,
Right.
or they have their work Facebook profile, so they, yes.
Separate, right.
So they create the fake IDs there and just join the group as that. So last semester we had, I think, 65 students among 4 sections, and 57 students were on Facebook group. Right. So, and it was great to announce concerts because there is just so much Russia-related activity in Austin right now that. But again, we cannot really check whether they've seen them all. So it's not a very reliable tool. For example, I would love for them all to go and see that musician, but we cannot really make it louder. It cannot overfill their mailbox. So use of Facebook is, of course, problematic. And it took me a while to figure out how to set up the settings so the students don't see my private life and whatnot. So there are groups that need to be organized, and not being a digital native, I think that's why I have this problem, because for them, I'm sure they know how to navigate that. So during the first year, these are, of course, multi-layered tasks, and we want students to spend as much time as possible. Then, because usually when they look at that assignment, then they start searching for videos of Moscow subway and of the pictures, and we can talk about how beautiful it is, and it's really the most beautiful subway in the world.
You mentioned that they submit these assignments in binders that you
Right.
check 3 or 4 times a semester. I love that idea. Are there
Kind of,
regular, are there more frequent assignments that you check on a daily or weekly basis, or are they just expected to submit them 3 or 4 times a semester and just keep up?
Yeah, they're supposed to keep up. So for example, the first submission will be within a month of the instruction, and we say, well, between 5 and 7 activities, any activity that you want. We just basically want them to be working on them constantly. So it's not about the grade in the first couple of submissions, more about them keeping track, because it's really hard, very easy to get behind in intensive Russian and get overwhelmed with grammar.
Well, we find that most students do keep up
Yes,
in order to stay.
yes, absolutely,
We have
absolutely.
homework. We have
Yes, homework
We have
too.
daily homework
Right.
every night.
Right, so it's not-
standard grammar,
Okay.
and then we have this in addition to that. So
Mhm.
we're thinking maybe on the weekends they would work on this when they have a little bit more time and aren't.
Or
wasting
instead their
so
math
much time.
homework.
Yeah.
I made the mistake the first time I used the portfolios of just having the full portfolio due at the end,
Right.
and then of course all they did was wait until the very end to do them all at the very
Yes.
end
Yes.
in a rush. So
It's also important that the term, this kind of binder, is a metaphor for
Right.
whatever format they wish to submit.
Right,
Because so many of our students, it is a student-centered activity, obviously. It's to your interest, each individual student.
They want to.
So if they want it to be a website, it's a website. They may hand it to you on a flash drive. They may hand it to you. Sometimes it is a physical object that they'll hand you. We get all kinds of stuff. They turn it in all kinds of formats, which is terrific, because it really does reflect a lot of what the student, well, how he or she sees himself, herself, vis-a-vis the Russian language. So it's really kind of cool, though. Some of them will make little films. Some of them will do recordings. Some of them will have friends, their Russian friends, talk to them, and this is recorded for us, and they'll submit that as a sound file. Yeah,
that's
also.
great too. That's
Exactly,
so-
exactly, yeah. So the idea of being a binder is just a metaphor.
it's not binding.
Yeah, it's not binding. Well said, well said.
So, but they do like the binder. I find that
Yeah.
lately all my students just like the binder. Some of them make it as beautiful scrapbooks and spend, I think, several hours just embellishing it and printing out more materials, and for example digging into like families, histories, and saying like, oh, these Yiddish words sound like these Russian words. So all kinds of different projects that they come up with. So I see maybe among 12 students, 3 very rudimentary portfolios. Just, okay, this is a task, that's it, I'm done. Most people just go to great lengths to make it more interesting. One student even stressed the pages to make them look like 19th century diary of an exploration of Russian flora and fauna. And she was an exception, of course, but usually they have a beautiful picture on the cover, so it just feels like it harks back, or it invokes some kind of interesting instincts in our students, because they want to make it their own, and so it's an appropriation of language through very manual work even. It's just very beautiful, because they have like Cheburashka on the cover, or Nijinsky on the cover, so just making it into their own, yes.
And how do they use, in this portfolio, is there writing that demonstrates their ability to use the grammar around that topic?
Right, so there are different types of activities. They're just these ones that use very little grammar. During the first semester, unfortunately, we cannot use too much grammar and too much vocabulary, because it takes us a very long time to just get to the point of forming any kind of sentence. So unfortunately, in the beginning, it's just choose and pick and click and select and print out, and then, for example, write a translation for what you're, so we know that the person knows what he's buying in the store. So a lot of it is very pictorial, if I'm not mistaken, in the first semester. In the second semester, during the second year Russian, we already have a more analytical tasks that allow students to explore culture in depth and make comparisons and write paragraphs or pages. And of course, there's another component, which is reading a Russian book in the original and writing reports. So reports will be a production of Russian language in the, for example, a page-long review of the book so far, and we have 3 of those before the final submission. So all of these tasks specifically are designed to test different skills, and they progress. We give them 20 options to choose from. For example, a task like this, and also, but they can also use whatever they want to explore Russian culture. So, and they do. For example, some of them love particular Russian bands. Some of them made reports on what was it? Industrial Russian music. I've never heard of those bands, but they translate the lyrics. They just enjoy it all. They just jump into it and start exploration. Late in class, everybody was horrified, I remember. But except for me, I was like, yes, this is great. Thank you. This is awesome. So it's just a wonderful, again, opportunity. And I think maybe it's better for less commonly taught languages, because I feel that we need to go extra length to retain the students and get them interested viscerally and almost physically in putting this all together and participating in culture. So I feel like, of course, we need to prepare very seriously each and every assignment we do that has to do with authentic material, but we also need to kind of throw different fun things at them and laugh and cry at those crazy Russians. And I exaggerate even sometimes some things about Russian culture just to keep it engaging and fun. So, and we can debate about that, because my teaching style is not very dry and not very strict, and probably in that debate between grammar and communicative approach, the communicative side, definitely. So let me show you one of the examples what we do for second year. Since in the second year of Russian, we're talking about proposal and marriage and inviting guests and having a guest or a ceremony at the wedding palace, Dvorets бракосочетания. So we try to fit the activities with those topics that we cover during the second year. And one of them, of course, the funny wedding pictures. Some of them are not very appropriate for for university environments, so we cannot really post them. And recently there was something, I think, on BuzzFeed, right? Did you see that? Yeah, so just no, don't go there. Or at least I will not show that in class. But we can show them some very kitsch, over-the-top Russian videos of engagements. And here you can actually ask them analytical questions, and they can critically explore culture and say, oh, this was a good idea, that was a bad idea. So, for example, как сделать предложение? So you see that still in the second year we have to use English sometimes to prop their understanding, so just to make sure that they understand everything. And we give them some props on how to introduce their arguments. So мне кажется, I think it's a good advice, I think it's a bad advice, this is stupid advice, this is, you shouldn't do this, should do that. And so they're watching the video, it says there, посмотрите видео и скажите, что по-вашему жених сделал правильно и неправильно. So what do you think the fiancé, the male fiancé did right and wrong? And then they're offered more videos for their own enjoyment. And they do watch all of them because they get so interested in what those crazy Russians will do. Because in one of the videos, you know, the Alые Паруса, the novel by Alexander Green, a very famous Russian novel, when a young lady was waiting for this beautiful vessel to come in with scarlet sails. And he actually recreated the vessel with scarlet sails to impress her and to propose in this beautiful, over-the-top, romantic New Russian way. So it was a very much of a nouveau riche type of engagement, but they enjoyed it. So I wanted to show you just a very short clip of what they were watching. And again, they don't have to understand everything, obviously, but they would read an article that was assigned to them on what are the good ideas about the proposal, or we'll discuss it in class. So that will be part of communicative approach during class time. Как вы думаете, какое хорошее предложение, что надо делать? Why do you think our main characters, what they did wrong, what they did right? Because we have two characters who propose, well, the male proposes to the female. Let me try to pull up that. I was surprised myself when I saw it. And the seriousness of it, and it's just the elaborate preparation for those proposals. It's just, you know, wealth of information, cultural information that they will be learning, even though it's not a direct task. Learning Russian alphabet again, right, with their letters. Making Олечка, да.
What does that mean?
That's her name.
Oh,
Olga.
Dear Olga, да.
It's gonna basically be a will you marry me?
Right. So Олечка, выходи за... And not everybody's there yet, but they're getting there.
Get your shirts on and come on.
Right.
Are these friends and family, or just?
Yeah, I think friends, yeah, probably friends and family.
This is so sweet.
Yeah, so some of them are sweet, some of them are too, even
Over the
too,
top.
yeah, over the top.
It's a great video for language.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. True.
And I think it's also, again, on psychological level, allows them to see, okay, Russians are okay, you know, they're like us, they like romantic things, they do fun stuff, and because a lot of what you hear in the news is a little scary, of course, with Putin's new laws, and you just can think that Russia is just not a safe place to go, but it is.
It's a pity it's not a gay couple, then it would really be.
Arrested on the spot, right?
Yeah.
Right, and so this also, since intensive Russian is a language and culture course, we do discuss a lot gender roles and perceptions of gender identities in Russia, and who proposes and why there's specific, the music to it. So we watch to the end.
I'll say yes.
I know. Does she have a choice in this?
No.
A lot of pressure, actually.
Right. Yeah. But also, we're talking how everything is changing because we never had engagement before in Russia, and now it's very popular. So before it's just you decide to get married and you get married. I think it was a yes, right?
Yeah, what's going on with the headphones?
Got a soundtrack film.
Yes.
Это лучшее время года, 3 месяца важной жизни моей. Весна подарила мне чудо природы, которое люблю все сильнее и сильнее. В тебя влюбился
But
я
it's
с
a,
первого
Right, so
it's a
she's
love rap.
listening.
I mean,
Right,
that's
it's
what
a love rap,
It's
yeah,
not
saying
a
that.
nasty rap at all.
Why didn't you have this sort, you know?
It was just very simple Soviet ceremony, or not even ceremony, it's just, it was perceived as very bourgeois, that much attention to feelings and embellishment. So you propose, you get married, it's done.
So it's sort of a cluster between old and new.
Yeah.
She's thinking, this better be what I think it is, or
Right.
forget it, we're done.
What else could it be,
Olga,
right?
Olga, can we go out to dinner? It would be terrible.
Olga, it's your turn to do the dishes tonight.
And of course, obviously during class we will never have that much time to devote to
Right.
watching videos. Definitely something to be reserved for home
Well,
viewing.
it's great because it actually makes it worth their while to watch it. There's a payoff. This has got a
Did,
story.
did,
to it.
did she say
Real
yes? Did
people.
she not?
Did
What
she or not?
happened?
Right? You want
Right.
to see that? What,
Right.
like, I want to see that. What happened?
I know, you cannot stop this, we have to see.
And then you start looking into Russian hip hop and
Yeah.
Время пришло сказать 5 важных слов. Олечка, выходи за меня замуж.
Aw.
I think he even sang this
I
song.
was gonna say,
Sounds
he
like,
just
yeah,
sang it,
because he probably,
It's his song.
yeah, I think he composed the song. The only
Yeah.
Боже,
yeah.
Боже, дело.
Also, we learned that Russians don't cry.
Yes.
Ever.
And don't smile much, right?
Mexicans do.
Right, so engagement rings is probably last 5 or 7 years.
And it's
Really
right
that
hand.
new?
Right.
Yes, it's the right
Right
hand.
hand,
Yes.
so many layers again to discuss here.
Look at those flowers.
I know. She seems very unemotional.
She
Yes.
does. She
And
sits-
this is very Russian
Yes,
about her,
yes.
so this is like perfect and sudden.
She's getting a little better now. It's getting better. I think you're singing it.
Yeah, it is.
Look at those heels, dude. That's it.
That's great.
Just being very shy and very.
Or lack thereof.
Well, maybe she's not quite sure she is.
I know.
That's a
And you
lot
could
of
write
pressure.
her a short response essay saying that I
Oh,
don't
now
really
she,
think
now
they
she
will
looks,
get
now she
married.
looks happy. Yeah.
I would be overwhelmed at that.
Oh, but this was terrific.
No, no.
This was terrific.
On that note, right, to make feel, make good, so. Back to our topic. On that note.
Do you ever get into generational things here? Because I mean, I've seen a lot of these in the States too. But it seems to be like the last 5 years or so,
Well,
right?
again, this whole notion that this generation, as Nancy said, that likes to show themselves, is kind of, I think calling exhibitionism sounds so negative,
But
but
it's
it really is,
normalized.
they put themselves out there, yeah. And I love this, as you did in Nancy's as well, that every picture you're using here, and this isn't just for the presentation you're doing, the students would see these. So if you see things like that wonderful, that got us all hungry, that poulet au pomme that you had, that gorgeous chicken potato thing and all that,
Yes.
that even a picture like here, I mean, this one's a really tricky one, is, you know, what are they doing? What is that thing in front of them, the bread and salt? What does that have to do with marriage and all? Every still image is also part of the lesson. Everything you're showing them is part of language and culture. It's terrific. That you're constantly being surrounded by something else to ask about, to
Right.
talk about.
Right, so this is also helping us with that constant theme of not having enough time to discuss anything in class, so we can discuss it online, we can post comments, so there are so many things that we can do.
It's just when they say, what is it? What are
Yeah, what are
they doing?
What's
What
white
is
stuff
that?
there? Is that what I'm thinking?
Yes. Please tell me that's not a wedding cake, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, yeah, so it's, and I like to keep it very light and form, so nothing is too serious, so it's also a deviation from Russian language instruction, I think, by the old school teachers, that it must be learned and taught this and that way, and grammar and translation, and don't touch your words, they're sacred, so. No, we touch everything, we make fun of everything, everybody, and of course, political events are always a very fair topic for discussion in class as well. Any comments, questions, observations? Yes. Yes.
I got one that's to me, the question being begged here as well, it's from both the presentations we've had so far, and that is, there is Claire Cronch did a long conversation about this subject about 10 years ago, and now with the blended classroom, it's much more this kind of actual question, which is where does the native speaker in the classroom fit in here? Because she called it the privilege of the native speaker,
Right.
that indeed in these especially in these intense environments, to what extent does someone like you have an advantage over someone like me, the non-native coming in, and vice versa? Where does the non-native speaker who's learned the language have an advantage and so forth? Can you talk just a little bit about your role here, this to some extent, if you would chime in too,
Right.
of what is it like to be the native speaker and sort of the cultural informant
Right.
to the class?
Right.
Benefit, is it not? I mean, what-
It's a very contentious topic, obviously,
it is.
because there are so many benefits to a native speaker in the classroom, but also disadvantages very clearly because of the feeling very strong about some political events. And I caught myself being so upset about Pussy Riot going on, but that I understand that I spent too much time, or like excessive, that everybody was interested in Pussy Riot, but I just could not stop talking about them. So, no, I mean, I still had a class, but I was just very vocal about my opinions. So yes, and I think that I will not, well, now I have an acquired insight into what challenges English-speaking students have in terms of learning Russian, but they do not come naturally, so I need to learn from those who are immigrants into the language to understand what are the challenges, because a lot of Russian native speakers just off, which is good, but just learn or scribal error or whatever we used to say that account for irregularity. So I think, but it can get tricky if you don't know what this bread and salt means in Russian culture. But then again, it depends on what instructors are hired. So it's just there's so many sides to that problem. What would you think?
Well, I was going to say, do you feel, I'm hearing from your answer, that
Right.
so you don't feel that only native speakers can teach an
absolutely
intensive
not.
class, that
No.
basically there could be advantages
Right.
to either side?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I don't think it's I would even think if it's a non-native speaker, that could be more efficiency in terms of you don't get bogged down in culture too much and just get to the point and use it in a more precise and concise manner, because there is a lot of pressure to cover so much in such a short time, because we're not unlike French, as you said, that you're reduced from 14 or 16 to 12 hours, we're reducing from 18 to 12. So it's really a huge
Russian.
concentrated serum of Russian, right?
Yeah.
So it's just really a huge challenge, and sometimes, yes, I think a native speaker might get bogged down.
What's your take, Nancy? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think that there are advantages and disadvantages, either way. I feel as a non-native speaker of French, a lot of times there are certain elements about the culture that I find so fascinating. I have a hard time not talking about them as well.
Right. That's certainly mine in Russian as well.
And even mine, being a native speaker, there's so many changes within this 10 years that I have not lived constantly in Russia that
Right.
sometimes things are brought up to me and they say, oh, they do it. No, they don't. No, they do it. Okay. So no, absolutely. I think it's just a matter of just being au courant all the time or not, and it's challenging for non-speaker or non-native speaker or native speaker. I think it's the same, well, almost the same.
Different challenges.
Yeah, different challenges.
Exactly.
And of course with younger kids, younger students, right? So finding out more stuff. And for example, even with my TA for last year with Masha, because I was saying, like, traditionally in Russia, women cook and clean and take care of children and work. And she's like, well, that's changing. And I'm like, well, it does, but still, so it's maybe the divide is, I don't know, 30 years of,
Right.
of age. So
Well,
just
yeah.
for her generation, men are doing half of the work. but it's like you can, and between the native speakers, you can have all those arguments and generational differences, even though, And of course, she's from Petersburg, and I'm from Saratov, which is a provincial town. So maybe those are also the differences, that we have a more predetermined patriarchal society there. So yeah, all kinds of interesting dynamics there. So I think anybody with good knowledge of Russian could teach this course successfully. And you can always say, well, explore and tell me how these attitudes are changing. So you're going to be the expert for the portfolio. Any other questions? I was also looking at the offerings in terms of hybrid courses at other institutions, and I found just a handful, really, of courses available. So this course from the University of Oklahoma, the professor claims that it was the first class to use the Language Learning Center's video conferencing capabilities to combine a group of remote and on-campus Russian students via daily Google Hangout sessions. So there are attempts, but they're scattered so far, and there is no unified kind of list of do's and don'ts for a Russian hybrid course. So it's really interesting and very fascinating to see how it will develop, because everything, it feels like it's on the verge of exploding right now, and things are in the works at different universities, just not very public yet. So also different ways of communicating students are being debated, whether it is a Hangout, whether it's Skype. We don't know exactly what is better, so and there are advantages to both, but in Skype, for example, you have to pay to have access to combine all the people in one video conference. Hangout is free, but then, so all of these concerns, and I'm really interested to hear whether you have any experiences with connecting students remotely. Of course, attracting more students from other universities is another big draw for hybrid courses, and this is an interesting course that will be offered starting next fall, so over the fall and next spring. So it's not there yet. You can register by February 21st, 2014. So this is particularly for Project Go students, and to allow cadets have greater flexibility on when they come to class, because we know that this is a growing part of our studentship in Russian especially, and with their insane ROTC schedules, it's really challenging for them to find time to devote 6 hours of instruction in class and then 2 or 3 hours per day for homework and portfolio. So this course or courses like that would allow greater flexibility, hopefully.
Okay, can you tell from that, I'm trying to skim it, what's the hybridity there? Because it seems to be all online for, if you, in other words, you can choose to either take the course in class.
Actual traditional classroom setting on Pitt's campus.
Right.
If you're there.
If you're there, and if you're not, you do it all
online.
Video,
distance.
Right.
I say video conference.
2 days a week,
Yes.
live class.
Yes.
Right.
So it's 4 time zones,
Right, I don't know how it will be carried out because I'm not sure.
But it claims
Well,
only for
says don't.
Pittsburgh area students, no? Am I misreading that? It says it's for students in the Pittsburgh
As well
area.
as students from Pittsburgh area colleges.
Right, so it would be,
Only Pittsburgh. I hadn't sense that.
oh, but then it says for students in other locations. No,
Right,
no, no, no,
right.
yeah, I don't.
Yeah, this is very vague, and this is also very characteristic of what's going on, I think, in the field, that it's still being tested, still work in progress, and probably, as Nancy indicated, you teach it once, twice, 3, 4 times, and then I guess you figure out the model, because there's just so many components to that that I feel overwhelmed, just because, just thinking about all the media parts and how to make it worthwhile and not just clicking through random resources and doing random. Well, actually, I had a comment for you that I really enjoyed the little armadillos in the actual first and second year, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
in the third year, maybe that could add
Bring the
the
armadillo.
application
Maybe
to the
so,
course.
if we need the armadillo.
Ducks, yeah, and then the black cat, because I took it here back in 2003 and really
Oh, is
enjoyed
that
it.
right?
Yeah, the story, before it was the hybrid course.
Right,
So some of the future developments, we can discuss that. I would think that we can definitely combine the best parts of the classroom instruction and online instruction, but I don't think that Russian lends itself to fully online instruction. I'm a strong proponent of FaceTime and interacting with your classmates and professor, obviously. So, and just even the kind of ritual of coming to class and being here, dedicating this time with other people, I think this is what they're trying to do in the SMOC course for psychology, just binding and bonding experience of being together in it and doing something together. So I think without it, I don't think we can really achieve the results that we want to achieve in terms of cultural proficiency. And linguistic proficiency maybe can be reached online only courses, but it's not such a valuable experience in my view. So the pilot project that is being developed in UT right now would have the grammar explained in the series of videos at home. So this is something similar to what we're doing in the intensive course. It's just you'll have the videos, so the more video or visually oriented students maybe will feel comfortable watching that and processing that information after watching the video 5 times, 10 times. And I'll show you a little clip, we don't have to watch all of it. So there is already a series of videos on the verbs, for example, the most challenging part of, well, one of the most challenging parts of Russian language. So it is also, of course, you can just read it plain dry text, but I think we're just really catering to this new generation that likes to do things visually. And there is a supplement that's just a printout or a grammar sheet for them to study from. So it combines the instruction for various ways that you can.
I'm just curious, like, how long are those videos, grammar exploration videos? Because I've seen this done for Turkish as well, but the videos are quite long.
No, 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, these
at
are like
most.
20
No,
minutes.
short attention span,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
ADD.
You really want
Let
to
me
keep it.
see. I don't know how to really click here.
You just kind of paste it into a.
Yeah, but it switches to the next. Maybe I can hide it for a moment.
Go to the edit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Hide all the mechanics of it. And in the meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to answer or ask questions or to make any comments about what's been said so far.
I think it's really important, just a bit of the text, Texas context here was, Marina did a very skillful job here in a sense, kind of diffusing the background of, so why are we seeing some of these now appearing, these courses appearing all over, looking at Pittsburgh or looking at Arizona State and so forth, or here at UT. Significantly, of course, one of the big pushes to create more of these courses came around 2008 with the budget crash. And I remember here at UT very much being part of a series of meetings where we were more or less given a mandate. We need to be able to cut the cost of offering our language classes. And indeed, the mandate was very much fewer people teaching more courses, more kind of out there for the students to do on their own.
With better outcomes.
So with better outcomes, which will cut down the number of instructors we pay, but get more students in the classrooms. Clearly, it was rather a bit nefarious, to say the least. To our credit, and I'm saying this with especially those who are in the room here from UT, the language instructors here very wisely got ahead of this problem very quickly, and that's one of the things you're seeing today are at least 3, and there are other efforts in the same vein, most notably actually Arabic was the first out of the kind of out of the gate to try to get in front of this question of, are we really going to just eliminate instructors from foreign language education by putting our best practices online and getting rid of the human person? And very quickly, the resounding answer from us, of course, was no, you can't do that. And to prove it in a way was to put out a good quality product, the Arabic program being one of the first flagship programs, that beautifully integrated huge amounts of off-campus work, online self-study work, portfolio work, but an essential part of the class still had to be face-to-face. And all of us now were trying, in a sense, Français Interactif was way ahead of the curve on this back in the early 2000s, putting this out there as one of the very first models anywhere in the country. And so I think it's kind of cool, actually, that we see so many people ask me, so you're a proponent of online? Are you trying to get rid of our jobs? What are you doing? And actually, we're saying quite the opposite here, that we are the moving force of these programs being good. That without that teacher quotient, even, I know Blake is going to talk about one that is much more heavily online, but yet again, I believe we'll talk about the essential role that the instructor has to play on getting these materials to be the right ones that appear online. So I think that's, just kind of, this is all that I see this more as making our job all the more essential in the classroom and for the materials we put online. Sorry, Tina, so much
No,
about
absolutely.
more of a political
because
statement there, because
I
we're.
would love to hear it as well, because nothing is really set in stone, even though there are first steps in the direction of making the videos or relegating, for example, homework to online only, because now they tear out the pages and they have to fill them out. So there are, of course, pros and cons for that, and we can discuss it. But again, any kind of.
I have a question about the grammar instruction. I guess specifically with what you're making, it's going to have video explanation. So is the explanation of the grammar and the video going to be done in Russian or in English?
In English, because it's first year Russian.
For the first year.
Yes.
And what about in class? If you explain grammar in class, do you do it in Russian or in
And
English?
unfortunately, yes, because during the first year instruction, they don't have the level to grasp those concepts in Russian. I mean, yeah, grammatical
So-
concepts.
It moves quite quickly, I have to
Right.
admit. I mean, by the time we get to, from September, no question, it's English, October, I'd say it's a blend of about 50-50. By, we're getting out this term in the semester, for example, it's the wrong semester, but in the fall, by the time we get to what would normally be fall break, by late October, it's really gone heavily now into Russian. Second semester is entirely in Russian. Yeah, so it's a fairly quick move in these intensive courses because you're going so quickly.
And these videos are only for the first semester. There's
Right.
No, I'm just
yeah.
curious, because I'm here with some colleagues, and we teach ESL through international office.
Right.
Mhm.
And so explaining things is a totally different ballgame because
Yes.
they're learning in the foreign language.
Right.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so
New
how-
vocabulary,
and so
right.
I think explaining grammar in class, for example, is maybe a more important part of it because it's harder for them to grasp things because they're trying to learn it in English instead of in another language.
Right, so I think we actually deal with this challenge of our students not knowing grammar, English grammar,
Yes.
in English.
Yes.
So that is
Yes.
why one of the assigned
Yes.
books is English
Huge.
grammar for students of Russian. So to explain all the concepts, to give them the vocabulary to work with, because, and if on top they have to learn those words in Russian, that would be overkill.
There's
Because
a classic early on. The accusative is the case of the direct object. And they look at you and say,
Right.
direct object. That would be.
Yes, yes,
And then, so accusative, that's the name of what?
yeah.
Case.
Excuse me?
And then
Right.
pause, and you pause. And what would a case be? And so
Yes.
you realize that the problem just starts to mushroom on you. So yeah, we realize this is an essential part of all of our courses now.
Right.
Teaching a little bit of grammar.
So
in
let's
English.
take a look, just the very beginning, or very beginning of this video that talks about different verbs of motion outside of the regular walking, riding, which is a huge milestone for Russian learners,
Yes.
and it's always a milestone stumbling block.
Slow death.
On verbs of motion. Today we will learn 3 more pairs of verbs of motion. To swim, плыть, плавать. To fly, лететь, летать. To run, бежать, бегать. Let's start with плыть. To swim, unidirectional in the present tense. Я плыву. Ты плывешь. Он, она, оно плывет. Мы плывем. Вы плывете. Они плывут. Плавать, to swim, multidirectional in the present tense. So talking about explaining grammar, they already have to have the prior knowledge of what is unidirectional, multidirectional, that Russian, in the present tense, Russian verbs have 6 forms. So there's just already such a wealth of information they need to retain in this sequence of videos.
So that was
Three
explained in
genders, three
an earlier
races.
video?
Huh?
So that was explained in like an earlier video?
Yes, in a series of videos. So this is, I think it's video number 4 of verbs of motion. So we'll first go through categories of directionality of walking and vehicle movement. And it's, even for a native speaker who tries to explain all that, it's just really overwhelming. And I commiserate with my students. I just feel for them so much. So part of being an instructor in intensive course is really being there for them, kind of it's going to be all right. And we invite usually the advanced speakers of Russian who took it for several years, and they speak and they go to Moscow, they work there. So to show that's not, there's light, there's light at the end of the
At this
tunnel.
point, they don't realize there's even a tunnel.
Right.
All they've been told is that Russian has this funny way of doing, distinguishing movement as either one way or randomly. And they think that's kind of going to be it. And then in
Right.
a couple of weeks, they're going to find out that you can put a prefix
I
on
was
any
about
of
to say
these
the prefix.
verbs,
Yes.
and suddenly aspect comes in.
Yes.
And these verbs will now completely change in form.
Right.
And now they'll see that there is a tunnel, and they won't see the light for another 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think a part of being the instructor for Intenso is kind of entertainer and
Yes.
coach and to kind of cheerleader. Yes, you can do it. You see, you're already conjugating. It's gonna be okay. I'll be there. So we're all in this together. And I do see a lot of bonding experience in intensive classes like I've never seen before in my 10 years of language instruction in the slow based or normal based classes.
Maria, this is kind of a technical
Sure.
question, but this video looks very well done. So do you
have a team of people helping you, or do you create this
That's,
yourself?
that's part with the, of cooperation with the College of Liberal Arts, also hiring the team from the engineering school, their video team. Because they already done several video lectures for their online courses, and they already have the full setup and the resources for that, so.
So you use the latest video people and the engineering school?
Late's, project management people and engineering school video group. But I think it's changing yet again for second year, so I'm not sure what direction it will take at this point. So this is just a set of videos that were done, and I think it's a closed project already, so second year, I'm not sure what kind of setup they will use, because I think the idea is that now to branch out into Russia and have more authentic videos shot on location, but I don't know the details about that.
I'm curious, maybe, do you know, Tom, if Dr. Blythe, or at least at Curl, there's any talk of putting together a central location for doing this for all of the languages? Because it'd be great if, you know, we had some central place, or even through the Texas Language Center.
Right. I mean, Coral would be the obvious place, actually, because of them being an open education resource, and that indeed would be the kind of sticking point. So for a little, I'll be very short here.
Sure,
Marina,
no, we'll take that. I'm gonna reset to show
We've
you.
got a real problem with the needs of the institution being one of trying to have some of these programs bring in money. And our desire as educators to make these materials open access.
Right, that's,
This is a real conflict.
Right.
If these were all, I mean, I would love to see everything that we do, everything that Arabic does, everything that Persian does, everything be put out there and anyone can use it, just,
right.
there it is. Give you a URL and you log on and you can learn like Frances Interactive, just get into it. The university is very like, well, so how is this going to make us any money?
Right.
How are we going to pay for this? So keeping everything on closed sites seems to be what we're doing, which is one of the reasons all of these things have been given now dedicated URLs
Right.
that only registered students can get to.
And you cannot see these videos in any way,
Right.
shape, or form.
Right. So
They're
then
unlisted and
putting them
not
through Coral,
shared.
which is the obvious home, wouldn't work because they're only for open resources. Right?
And yeah, to me personally too, the French model or Portuguese model is just so attractive and just,
So
I think
much.
it's more aligned with where everything is moving that for the newer generation. Nobody wants to register. It's just like not,
Yeah.
I don't know how to reconcile those, yeah, the drive to make profit and then, yes.
Well, Marina, to that point, one thing I just didn't have time to mention is, you know, we've been asked by the university, by systems to create an exclusively online French version
Right.
for non-UT
For non-UT
students.
students.
That we have to teach for the first time in January of 2016. So we're Paul Santa Active will remain intact and will remain open, but we are also going to have a fully online version of first and second semester, where interaction will take place virtually through like Adobe Connect.
Right.
We're still trying to decide if it's going to be a synchronous or asynchronous class, you know, again, built-in flexibility so people can do it when they want, and they have like 1 or 2 hours a week that are set for the interaction. We're still trying to figure all that out.
But non-degree seeking
No,
people from anywhere.
it will be degree seeking. They will have to pay. It won't be a move, and it's going to be, it's not open, so they will
Right.
have to pay.
Right.
And we're still negotiating how much is going to actually go to the department, how much goes to the college, all that. And we'll probably see very little. And again, what is the advantage of doing it through UT versus like Rosetta Stone
Right.
or something like that? You know, is there really a need for it? We don't know, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
So, because if we don't do it, they made it clear that someone else would take our materials and do it for us. And we said, okay, no, we'll do it.
Right.
So
And
we're
it feels like a series of ultimatums, you know, like
Yes,
it's just okay, well, somebody else will do it. So it just feels,
Right.
yeah, partly, of course, there's an excitement about offering hybrid courses, but partly it's the pressures to, you know, everything is cut, okay, do you want to stay here? Yeah, so unfortunately, yes, there is all those considerations, yes.
Has there been any talk, do you know, of using advertising or as a way of making funds for things that are open? I mean, especially even if you can do advertising in the language, like how great is it to be using a French Coke commercial to teach French and get Coke to supply some money that we're
Well,
doing
that's
that, we're using their commercials
Such
to
a
teach them.
Pandora's box, I think.
I mean,
where
it could
it's
be,
not-
yeah, I don't know, is that a,
Ironically, I can only speak for Russian on this one. Every time we've tried to, we've done that, using because of the authenticity of the material. I've used
Right,
Coca-Cola
Russian
commercials,
MTV and-
MTV, I've
yeah.
used all this stuff, and what I've been told in every single case, Coca-Cola being the only exception, which basically said, oh, good God, no, you have to pay for that. And it was an enormous fee. I mean, it was exorbitant to the point that we laughed. It was so much. I'm trying to remember. It was something ridiculous like $600,000 per minute, and a renewable contract. So that was only good for anyway. Long
So
story.
for them to
MTV
basically advertise.
To advertise, we had to pay for their advertising. MTV basically said, look, this is too difficult for us to discuss. Why don't you just, this is Russia, just use them. No one's going to notice. So we have been for the last now, I mean,
Right.
Rockin' Russian has been up since 2008, I want to say. And so far, no one's said anything that we're using all these MTV videos.
That's another, crazy thing about Russia,
Yep.
because a lot of materials are available, open, but it's really hard to work with publishing houses. I think Katya is nodding because she says,
Yep.
or any kind of companies, well, except Coca-Cola, the multinational ones, but it's just kind of a wilderness out there.
I think Pandora's box is exactly
Right.
the right metaphor to use here. It's just, it's
And with the whole
possible.
It's already
commercialization
enough
of-
work just getting it going to add that whole level.
It's a whole, and UT Legal will want to be
Right,
involved in
right,
it. Oh,
yes.
oh.
Can I ask a question then? Yeah, you guys are most experienced on this. I mean, this is also a campus question, but then for smaller languages like ours that are not going to make a profit
Right.
for the university.
Right.
I mean, our desire has been to go through open source,
Right.
open
Sure,
sources.
sure.
Mainly because there's a dearth of quality materials out there to basically
Right.
begin to advance the field.
Right.
But,
Systems, sorry.
I mean,
Systems idea is
Yeah,
really, we've been very specific, because we've talked about this for things, languages similar in terms of scope, like Bulgarian, where we think, well, there's not a huge crowd there, can't we just put that? No, their theory really is if you build it, they will come. And the reason there aren't huge numbers of people taking version or taking these classes is because they're not available widely. So if you build the course, make it available, suddenly UT is, this is not me speaking, this is system speaking, we're going to find just hundreds and hundreds of people out there dying to learn Persian who are going to be willing to pay whatever it is, $1,000 a credit hour, whatever, I don't know. They're going to pay for this course. So you make it, and you're going to find people out there who are going to want it. Again, I don't have any idea where they're getting the notion from, other than models that exist already, and they're not comparable to the humanities, right? These are courses like science course, math courses, and so forth that really do have massive audiences out there who probably will or do pay for these courses. Languages like Persian and Turkish and all.
I guess I was just going to get, having had a lot of experience, I was going to get your take on, for us, is it better to lean more heavily towards, I mean, we end up with a mix of products, even what we've got here, so it's a mix of, right? A mix of something that has a small profit tag on it and some that don't, right?
Ours is all open.
Yeah, I mean, ours is not, but yet it came
Right.
close. It's still, it's good.
The model seems to be, I think, very much of what Nancy was saying, that all of us, probably as humanists, kind of lean toward the open side, right? Put it out there, get it out there, because we just want our stuff for people to see and use. And then if the cards fall in such a way that someone tells you, no, we need to make, say, turn this into something for sale, for profit, it's easier to go the other direction. That is to make something that you've packaged already to be available, to turn that into a for sale product, than the other way around, to undo the price tag. That's a lot tougher. So I mean, whenever people come to me and have asked for through the Texas Language Center, what do you recommend? Should we put this tiny, I'm trying to remember, someone was talking about an Esperanto course, of all things, seriously. Esperanto to make it for profit or to be open. I always say open, do open. And if the demand turns out to be there, then you can start thinking about maybe this bit of it or whatever, maybe for pay. That's right, that's right, yeah, that's right.
And just not to encroach on your time, I'll just show one more thing that's,
The new platform.
yeah, so since UT is switching to Canvas, it's really interesting to explore its capabilities, possibilities, and the tools that it gives us. I have to say that this is, again, a work in progress, and this is just a couple of examples that have been designed so far in terms of exercises. Of course, I need to log in, right? So the idea is to start doing the homework online as well as, oh no. Okay, well, that didn't work out so well, but it's basically grammar exercises online on Canvas. And Canvas gives you an option of doing quizzes or multiple choice questions. You can embed tiny audio clips. So that exercise that I wanted to show you is that recognizing the audio clips, one letter, and then you fill it, you basically do the multiple choice. So very simple ones, but they keep them engaged, and it's trackable. You can see who did it, when, and for how long, and how many takes. So again, much more control for the professor. And just to close the presentation with yet another hybrid. Vodka and matryoshka, as Russian as it gets. So thank you so much, and I want to welcome questions after the last presentation, right? So yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, the camera didn't work. It worked
Seeing
earlier.
all three of these presentations actually dovetailing very nicely one with the other, so I think this might be a good, no, because I have a good sense of what our next presentation might have in it. These will all be something.
Yeah, let me close out. You can hide with the pictures, and then just click show projector.
There's a USB plug in.
Oh, is this your picture?
Yes. Yes, it is.
So I shouldn't open any internet browser.
You can open it.
Oh, good, they found
Clean browser. This is my first show computer. Cleaned it up. No, this is my first show computer. I have one at home. Has all my bits on it, as it were. Careful. Yeah, all too soon, too much, too. Those ones you heard.
That's true. Okay.
I know my audio. No, I know. Yeah, that link itself.
Replenish content.
I'm scared of math.
Don't be afraid. I'm afraid of PC. So what do you want to do? I just want to go to a browser?
No, I just want to open
God, I got too much.
Oh, there.
Okay, I'm sorry. And you can also see it in icons if you'd rather do that. Oh, look at you, right there. Okay, so then we will just finish.
Oh, okay.
And of course. Pleased to be going. You're the presenter. We can't start till you get back.
You're the now.
Get back.
You know, just to continue the conversation
Yeah.
from before, it seems to me that there's also a lot of middle ground between making everything free and then having things specific to courses. I mean, the whole consortium.
I don't know.
I'm very careful with German.
Yes.
And
But you know what?
particularly for,
Cold coffee is better than nothing.
universities
The
or
medium
colleges
and the
where
light
you don't
roast.
have enough people to teach higher upper advanced level courses.
That's right, that's right.
So that's a way of still providing income to the profit for the university.
We're doing that in
and
Slavic.
exchanging it, right?
We're doing that in Bulgarian and Ukrainian and Czech.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and the plan is to do this as consortia with the University of Pittsburgh, as it turns out, and other Texas schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people at Texas Tech, or actually it's UT Arlington, we're training one of our very high-level fourth-year Russian classes in Czech to get one of their classes. I believe it's in Ukrainian or something, or Pittsburgh's even Ukrainian. We're doing Bulgarian here to give to the, yeah, so it is this kind of share the resources, share the pool.
And then we don't need to worry about development community because it happens, it's a little bit different, obviously.
It's much more organic. Yeah, I agree. That is a good middle ground. And I'm kind of hoping it gets enough momentum that it kind of supersedes this desire just to create it and let's make some money off of it. Because I don't see the
Time on it.
So, because